Aphorism 225. Whether it be hedonism, or pessimism, or utilitarianism, or eudaimonism, all these modes of thought, which assess the value of things according to pleasure and pain, that is to say, according to attendant and secondary phenomena, are foreground modes of thought and naiveties which any one conscious of creative powers and an artist conscious will look down on with derision, though not without pity. Pity for you, that, to be sure, is not pity for social distress or society in its sick and unfortunate, for the vicious and broken from the start, who lie around all of us. Even less it is pity for the grumbling, oppressed, rebellious slave classes who aspire after domination. They call it freedom. Our pity is a more elevated, more foresighted pity. We see how man is diminishing himself, how you are diminishing him. And there are times when we behold your pity with a indescribable anxiety, when we defend ourselves against this pity, when we find your seriousness more dangerous than any kind of frivolity. You want it, if it was possible, and there is no other modeler, if possible, to abolish suffering, and we? It really does not seem that we should rather increase it, make it worse than it has ever been. Well-being, as you understand it, that is no goal, that seems to us an end, a state which soon renders man ludicrous and contemptible, which makes him desirable to perish. The discipline of suffering, and great suffering, do you not know that it is this discipline alone which has created every elevation of mankind hitherto, that tension of the soul in misfortune which cultivates its strength, its terror at the sight of great destruction, its infi- inventiveness and bravery in undergoing and enduring, interpreting, exploiting misfortune, and whatever of death, mystery, mask, spirit, cunning, and greatness has been bestowed upon it. Has it not been bestowed through suffering, through the discipline of great suffering? And man, creature, and creator are united. In man there is matter, fragment, excess, clay, mud, madness, chaos. But in man there is also creator, sculptor, the hardness of the hammer, the divine spectator, and the seventh day. Do you understand this antithesis, and that your pity is for the creature in man, for that which has to be formed, broken, forged, torn, burnt, annealed, refined, that which has to suffer and should suffer? And our pity do you not grasp from whom our opposite pity is for you when it defends itself against your pity, as the worst of all pampering and weakening? Pity against pity, then. But to repeat, there are higher problems than the problems of pleasure and pain and pity, and every philosophy that treats only of them is a piece of naivety. Aphorism 226. We immortalists, this world which concerns us, in which we have to love and fear, this almost invisible and audible world of subtle commanding, subtle obeying, a world of almost in every respect phos- sophistical, insidious, s- sharp, tender, and sophistry. It is well defended, indeed, against clumsy spectators and familiar curiosity. We are entwined in an austere shirt of duty, and cannot get out of it. And in this we are men of duty, we too. Sometimes, it is true, we may dance in our chains, and between our swords. Often it is no less true. We gnash our teeth at it, and frown impatiently at the unseen hardship of our lot. But do we what we will, fools in appearances speak against us and say, these are men without duty. We always have fools in appearances against us. Aphorism 227. Honesty. Granted that this is our virtue, from which we cannot get free, we free spirits. Well, let us labor at it with our virtue, of all the malice and love, and not weary of perfecting it ourselves. And only one who we have, may its brightness one day overspread this aging culture in its dull, gloomy seriousness, like a glide assures, mocking even glow. And if our honesty should one day nonetheless grow weary, and sigh, and stretch its limbs, and find us too hard, and like to have things better, easier, gentler, like a agreeable vice, let us remain hard, we at last, of the Stoics. And let us send to the aid of our honesty whatever we have of devilry in us, our disgust at the clumsy and casual, our intimir in venitum, our adventurous courage, our sharp and facetious curiosity, our subtleness, most disguised, most spiritual will to power, and world overcoming, which wanders avidly through all the realms of the future. Let us go to the aid of our God with our own devils. It is probable that we shall be misunderstood and taken for what we are not. But what of that? People will say their honesty is their devilry and nothing more. But what of that? And even if they were right, have all gods hitherto not been such devils grown holy and been rebaptized? And what do we know of ourselves when all's said and done? And what the spirit which leads us on would like to be called? It is a question of names, and how many spirits we harbor. Our honesty, we free spirits, let us see to it that our honesty does not become our vanity, our pomp and finery, our limitation, our stupidity, and most assuredly our frivolity. Every virtue tends towards stupidity, every stupidity towards virtue, stupid to the point of saintliness. They say in Russia, let us see to it that through honesty we do not finally become saints and bores. Is life not a hundred times too short to be bored in it? One would have to believe in eternal life too. Aphorism 228. May I be forgiven the discovery that all moral philosophy hitherto has been boring and soporific, and that virtue has in my eyes been harmed by nothing more than it has been by this boringness of its advocates, in saying which, however, I should not have to overlook their general utility. It is important that as few people as possible should think about morality. Consequently, it is very important that morality should not one day become interesting. But do not worry. It is still now as it has always been. I see no one in Europe who has any idea that thinking about morality could be dangerous, insidious, seductive. That fatality could be involved. Consider, for example, the indefatigable, inevitable English utilitarians, and with that clumsy, worthy feet they walk, stalk, and, to use Homeric metaphors that say it more plainly, along in the footsteps of Bomnum, just as he himself had walked in the footsteps of the worthy Helvetius. Not new idea, not subtle expression, or turn of an old idea, not even a real history of what had been thought before. An impossible literature altogether, unless one knows how to leaven it with a little malice. For into these moralists, too, whom one has to read with mental reservations, if one has to read them at all, there has descript that old English vice called cant. which is moral tautology, this time concealed in its new form of scientificality. There are also signs of a secret struggle with prongs of conscience, from which a race of former Puritans will naturally suffer. Is a moralist not the opposite of a Puritan? That is to say, as a thinker who regards morality as something questionable, as worthy of question marks, in short, as a problem, is moralizing not immoral? Ultimately, they all want English they all want English morality to prevail, inasmuch as mankind, or the general utility, or the happiness of the greatest number. No, the happiness of England would best be served. They would not they would like with all their might to prove to themselves that to strive after English happiness, I mean after comfort and fashion, and as the supreme goal, a seat in Parliament, is at the same time the true path of virtue. Indeed, that all virtue there has ever been on earth has consisted in just such a striving. Not one of these ponderous herd animals with their uneasy conscience, who undertake to advocate the cause of egoism as the case for the general welfare, wants to know or scent that the general welfare is not an ideal, or a goal, or a concept to be grasped at all, but only a emetic. That is what is right, for one cannot by any means therefore be right for another, that the demand for one morality for all is detrimental to precisely the higher men, in short, that there exists an order of rank between man and man, consequently, also between morality and morality. They are all modest and thoroughly mediocre species of man, these English utilitarians, as and as above said, in so far as they are boring, one cannot think sufficiently highly of their utility. One ought even to encourage them, which is in part the objective of the following rhymes. Hail, continual plotters, hail! Lengthen out the tedious tale. Patent still in head and knee, dull of humor, not a trace. Permanently commonplace, sans gêner as sans esprit. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Beyond Good and Evil. We immediately begin with four, and one would be crucial later in this episode, but four crucial isms: hedonism, pessimism, utilitarianism, and eudaimonism. We're familiar with both hedonism, utilitarianism, and pessimism, but we'll have a higher comprehension and familiarity of utilitarianism in the final aphorism. But eudaimonism to Nietzsche is a mode of thought that was proposed from not solely the Stoics, but Aristotle himself. He says that this mode of thought will assess the values of things according to pleasure and pain, and he involves pity too. But we'll inevitably see that they become afterthoughts with the higher and nobler individuals. But we continue forward that it becomes secondary and a attendant phenomenon, which is tied to consciousness, that it's a epiphenomenon or something that's secondary. And nonetheless a foreground of modes of thought, of naivety, or cunningness, which anyone serious of creative powers and as artist conscious will look down on them with derision, though not without pity. Now he includes pity in a creative, artistic sense. We'll arrive at that. Pity for you, that, to be sure, is not pity for social distress, for society, and its sick and unfortunate, for the vicious and broken from the start, who lie all around us. Even less it is pity for the grumbling, oppressed, rebellious, slave classes, who aspire after domination. They call it freedom. Now, this reinterpretation of pity is what we've previously been exclaiming of pity, is that it's not a selfless act, but a true act of self-indulgence for the benefits and advantageous positioning for another person, whilst in the same domain and domination of you, aka you're not acting as yourself in a selfless sense, you're being selfish. And he doesn't advocate for this form of pity. He's realizing that this form of pity is selfishness that others commit, but why not I commit this? Well, he says that becomes a mode of thought and naivety because how society inculcates it. But then why is he arriving at our form of pity? He'll continue saying that our pity is a more elevated, more far-sighted pity. We see how man is diminishing himself, how you are diminishing them. And there are times when you behold your pity with a indescribable anxiety, when we defend ourselves against this pity, when we find your seriousness more dangerous than any kind of virility. This form of pity is he's describing of the soul of Christ, the participation of this venerable and honored style of life. That's to be combined in your life, but combined inside for a balanced and equilibrium style of life. The soul of Christ, he won't describe it here, but it's one of the metaphors that he's said, a Roman Caesar with the soul of Christ. That second part, as I'm describing now, is an individual who's willing to expand himself for the plight and ambition for and to men, while at the same time sacrificing oneself for the higher species of life for themselves and others. To a degree, this is what he's describing as pity, that willingly expanding and heightening oneself for the others. It's the form of gift-giving virtue as a true form of pity and selflessness, not the pity in the sense of what he's describing here. This, as he says, is a indescribable anxiety that is more dangerous than serious in a kind of fertility, aka a kind of frivolousness. You want, if possible, and there is no matter, if possible, to abolish suffering. And we? Question mark. It really does seem that we should rather increase it and make it worse than it has ever been. Well-being, as you understand it, that is no goal. That seems to us an end, aka well-being is a mere tool, or, as he said, means to an end. A state which soon renders man ludicrous and contemptible, which makes it desirable that he should perish. The discipline of suffering and great suffering. Do you not know that this is discipline alone which has created everything that has elevated mankind hitherto, aka the evil parts of humanity, or it would have been the Maxims and Interludes, Part 4, where he's describing that if the evil qualities inside man were rebaptized and redeemed for oneself, it becomes the great qualities of society. He's describing here that suffrage or pain is that discipline. Well, to quote Bowser from the Mario movie, pain is a great teacher. That tension of the soul in misfortune which cultivates its strength, its terror at the sight of great destruction, its inventiveness and bravery in undergoing, enduring, interpreting, exploiting misfortune, and whatever of death, depth, mystery, mask, spirit, cunning, greatness has been bestowed upon. Has it not been bestowed through suffering, through the discipline of great suffering? What he's describing is this form of rank of order, where one is one individual is in the position of enduring, affirming, and transforming innovatively this form of pain, while others can't absorb it. They simply perish, as he said previously. What makes it desirable that he should perish, this ludicrous and contemptible man, because he prefers to abolish this suffering. But he again realizes that this suffrage isn't to be a burden to passively overcome. This involves the will to power that he describes multiple times from previous aphorisms, but doesn't say the concept itself. Sometimes, I think in the next aphorism or the next two, he'll say spiritual will to power again. But he realizes that inside the will to power, that the that novelty arrives. Novelty and creation and creativity arises from pain, not to be passively overcome, but to actively and affirmatively overcome through self-commanding. And he'll say here that the creature and creator are united. This is crucial too. In man there is matter, fragment, excess, clay, mud, madness, chaos, but in man there is also creator, sculptor, the hardness of the hammer, the divine spectator, the seventh day. Do you understand this antithesis? What's crucial is that chaos and seventh day. Seventh day in religious contexts, say Christianity, the seventh day is the rest day. Nietzsche, ironically, uses that seventh day as a form of solitude. The day to where we don't become progressively absorbed in a faceless society for being isolated from ourselves and from others, but to cultivate, heal this form of unparalleled freedom and to transform, self-reflect, etc., etc. That's where he describes the seventh day. The chaos is the Dionysian. The Dionysian spirit in Nietzsche, in Nietzsche's philosophy, is the chaos, the irrationality, the pain. Because why? And plus, with wine, intoxication, exuberance, and contrariety. But with Dionysus, he's the mythological example of pain. Save for the tragic hero, Dionysus has experienced that pain, thus he possesses that tragic hero, which Aristotle doesn't comprehend. But Aristotle's irrelevant. That's my criticism to Aristotle of the tragic hero. But nonetheless, that becomes relevancy because with the tragic hero, the audience elicits this form of pity and sympathy for this person's downgoing. Nietzsche said, no, he would say that this undergoing, interpreting, exploiting of misfortune and this endurance is not a cunning, isn't deceit, isn't condemnation among this individual. This is a source of excellence, of self-cultivation, in an artistic style of life, or to use a German word, Bildung. It's fascinating. I'm saying all this in the first aphorism. But this beautifully ties with the second one. Nietzsche describes it here on the first aphorism, so I'm combining the two. He continues forward, and that your pity is for the creature in man, for that which has to be formed, broken, forged, torn, burned, annihilated, annailed, refined, that which has to suffer and should suffer, aka their pity is inflicting pain upon others and themselves for the weight bearing of the universal pitying principle. including the tragic hero that I was describing earlier. And our pity, do you not grasp whom our opposite pity is? For when it defends itself against your pity as the worst of all, hampering and weakening. Pity against pity, then. But to repeat, there are higher problems than the problems of pity, pleasure, and pain. In every philosophy that treats only them is a piece of naivety. If you didn't comprehend nor realize what he was describing, that that pleasure and pain are united, but never separated. That's why he said creature and creator are united. He doesn't prefer, due to its contemptible nature. Oh no, not nature. Well, nature and habit that separate the two to isolate to two isolated and static conditions stagnates the flourishing and becoming of the two. You desire pain, anticipate some pleasure. You desire pleasure, anticipate some pain. This involves at the same time some form of pity, both internal and external. I did the opposite, internal and external. Now, for 227, honesty. To briefly say, when's the last or recent time that you've become honest or truthful with yourself? Or as Nietzsche would say, this is our virtue from which we cannot get free, we free spirits. Yes, this is a 5-second pause for you, the viewer, to contemplate the previous time you were honest and truthful to yourself. Continuing forward. Let us labor at it with all our virtue, that love and malice are not the wearing fact of perfecting ourselves. The only one we have may its brightness one day overspread its aging culture, and its dull, gloomy, serious, that like the glide azure to the mocking evening of glow. Poetic, I'd say. AKA, while others frown upon their ebb in life, some, the handful of free spirits, frown at their flow, because they prefer not what other people prefer, but some perishing, some downgoing, some form of dying or convalescence. Honesty. And this involves being truthful with oneself. That's why he said of self-reflection in the previous efforts. Stretch its limbs. Let us too be hard. Like to have things better, easier, gentler, like the agreeable vice. Let us all stay hard. Let us remain stoic. But he disagrees with this. He's saying that honesty should one day nonetheless grow wary and sigh with itself, because that form of honesty, of being stoical, of being this physical example of spiritual will to power, and at the same time having this cunning internal introspective pleasuring of, oh, if I can be stoic, that person can be stoic. And if they're stoic, I can be stoic too. We must be hard. We must go on further as emotionless, linear. We must have nature agree to this stoa, this universalization, and rigid hypocrisy and dogma. That's what we do. Nietzsche would say this is an agreeable vice among you equal utilitarians, aka which involves the Stoics. In the eyes of Nietzsche. He would continue forward that let us send this honesty with some devilry, too, while at the same time our disgust at the clumsy and casual, our intimate nit imir in viventium. It's It's Latin for we strive for the forbidden. He says this, he quotes Ovid from Amours. He says the same thing in his personal autobiography, Ecce Homo. Now, what is he saying here of we strive for the forbidden, aka being truthful with oneself? That is forbidden. Our adventurers, courage, and sharp and fastidious curiosity, our subtleness, most disguised, most spiritual, will to power, and world overcoming, which wanders avidly through all the realms of the fortune. Let us go to the aid of our God, with all the devilry involved. It is probable that we shall be misunderstood and taken for what we are not. AKA, why commit this linear and boredom life, and the boredom life, and their form of honesty, in their form of devilry, in their form of godliness, and them condemning us as being devils in the eyes of a deity. That's why he was saying the Latin quote of we strive for the forbidden. That is what we are. And to finish this one. And how many spirits we harbor? Our honesty we free spirits. The people will say their honesty is their devilry, and nothing more. Which transitions to 228. He first says that, may I be forgiven the discovery that all moral philosophy hitherto has been boring, and that virtue has in my eyes been harmed by nothing more than it has been by this boring of its advocates, which involves the utilitarians. Utilitarians, this would be a fascinating quick episode. Utilitarians inside Nietzsche's eyes, he's been saying this again and again, utilitarian this, utilitarian that. It originates from the French and English Enlightenment thinkers, which he has one of Helvetius. Claude I think he's Adrian Helvetius. His philosophy is from his 1758 work on the mind is it attacks religious religious morality, while at the same time advocating and protecting the concept of social welfare, aka the greatest happiness of the greatest number. Yes, I closed the book early because of my confidence. Why is he saying this? Helvetius agreed that humans were birthed as blank slates, blank slats of metal that acquires knowledge through sense experiences and association of ideas, while it's at the same time becoming a crucial Enlightenment thinker and defender of materialism and utilitarian theory of human nature. Nietzsche utterly disagrees with this because he disagrees with the Enlightenment era as becoming the rational atheists of his time. The rational atheists see the Christians and other religions as individuals who lack knowledge and reason, whom are rechristened as the bad because of their lack of knowledge and reason, of not being clear conscious or clear cognitive or clear conscience of their reality, aka their good conscience. That, as what Nietzsche was describing earlier, becomes a mode of thought and naivety through cunning, scientificality, and stagnation through dogma. And this ties with the will to truth. I haven't said this recently, but the entire time Nietzsche is describing this form of will to truth is in every time he describes it in a non-verbal, in a non saying sense of the will to truth, aka he says it without saying it. This is relevant to the English utilitarians, where they say that what is practically useful and what's impractically dreadful. Say, for example, the evil qualities I was describing earlier. They'd say that's impractically dreadful. Don't use them. Because the good qualities is that pity, that guilt, that bad conscience, that stagnation, that celibacy, that isolation, that abstinence, fasting, etc., etc. What preserves the species. Including, and he'll quote Helvetius, or Claude Adrien Helvetius, of that greatest happiness of the greatest number. That is what modern progressivism has evolved to. Progressive in the sense of what I said earlier, practically useful, and what is impractically dreadful. Ooh, move the camera. AKA self-preservation. Nietzsche realized that self-preservation is a frequent but indirect result of discharging energy, or the will, or the passions for that vulnerable aftermath of that discharging. But this self-preservation is having the passions to sleep, aka odium, or medicine, or social media, or entertainment, or sports, or alcohol, or work, etc., etc. The normative principle is becoming multifaceted physical examples. If you don't remember, the normative principle is there was a French doctor play where he's prescribing odium or odium, opium to a patient. He's not describing the symptoms nor the after effects, but he's rewording the usage of opium, similar to how those multifaceted physical examples I've said. They're not describing the true utility of them, but they're rewording themselves to be camouflaged. Nietzsche saw this as the early signs of nihilism. This English utilitarianism, where the greatest happiness of the greatest number is a form of egalitarian, still reserved, unifying, unifying and Christianization effect of modernity, both of his time and after his time, and before his time. And that final sentence before the poem that he described, or not poem, but the rhymes of dullness, and the commonplace of spiritedness becoming a looming shadow in the eyes of a insincere and not candid individual. He was describing the order of rank. There's the order of rank again. Of man of man, morality of morality. While Nietzsche disagreed with Helvetius or other individuals who saw that that humans were birthed as blank slates of metal inside their mind, he'd say that's a form of stagnation, a form of being that's not becoming. It's not involved itself in the enduring, creative, exploiting, and undergoing effect of nature. There's now the gay science, to quote Nietzsche in The Gay Science. Quote, it's Aphorism 26. Quote, what does it mean to live? To live, that means to continually slaw off making something of ourselves that wants to die. To live, that means to be cruel and impeccable to all that is old and feeble in us. And not only in us, then doesn't that mean to be without pity towards the dying, the wretched, and the old, always being a murderer. And yet Moses said with his implacable might, "Thou shalt not kill." English utilitarians use that Moses quote of "don't kill, don't do this, don't do that," because you know why? The great cause hollows out the war. Nietzsche would say, no, the great war hollows a great cause. No, hollows, halos. So the great cause halos a feeble and trivial war. Nietzsche said, no, the great war is a halo to a great cause. That is everything for today. My name is Gregory. Appreciate for watching. Amor fati. Love your fate.